Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Perspective by Monica Mccallan, narrated by Lori Prince. Chapter 1. She signed. Campbell St. Clair sat upright in her apartment as her mind worked to keep up with the voice on the other end of the phone. Who? She already knew the answer, even as she said the words and a silent prayer to a god she didn't believe in that she was wrong. Sloane Murphy, Betty retorted, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I've been talking to you for weeks about this. There was a change in her filming schedule, and she became available for the film. Do you even listen to me? You're paying a lot of money to not listen, so I hope it's worth it. Campbell groaned and shifted her position on the sofa, her fears finally confirmed. The money jab aside, Betty was right. Her agent was one of the best in the business and had worked diligently to bring this book, her book, to the big screen. Campbell trusted Betty's judgment more than she trusted her own, but that wasn't a high compliment with her current mental state. I am listening. I don't know what that Sophia what's-her-name was thinking, dropping out so last minute, but it's worked out better than we could have hoped. I think she went to rehab, Betty. It doesn't seem like she really wanted to. She wasn't sure, but she'd seen a few articles on the internet. In the entertainment world she'd been pulled into the past few months, exhaustion was typically code for court-mandated rehab. As you know, Betty continued, full steam ahead, pre-production is set to begin next month. Campbell didn't appreciate the tone, but she deserved it. Okay. The word was stiff and unnatural as it rolled out, difficult to expel between her slightly chapped lips. I'm glad you write better than you converse. Betty laughed hoarsely, and Campbell could picture her sitting at her minimalist desk, clicking her long nails against the glass. Consulting on a movie is a huge deal. Not all authors get the opportunity to do it. Don't make me an idiot for fighting for your seat at the table. Campbell's voice faltered, her shoulders slumping back into the sofa. I know, Betty. You're right. I'll bring my A-game next week. Sorry, I'm a little out of it right now. Is this about Sloane? Campbell could practically hear the tisk-tisk in Betty's voice. It had been a huge mistake to mention that she'd known Sloane briefly during college. It felt childish to think about, letting her past negatively impact something that could change her life. But she could do this. She had to do this. She was Campbell St. Clair, at least on her book covers. She had a best-selling novel under her belt that would soon be turned into a major motion picture. College was a long time ago, and she wasn't going to let past drama, or whatever it had been, seep into her current success. No, I think I'm just nervous. Like you said, I don't want to mess this up. Sweetie. Betty's voice softened at the admission. You'll be fine. We'll have our meeting in New York to touch base on your new book during filming, and the first draft of the script is done. Other than consulting on some of the more nuanced scenes, the movie's in great hands. I have the utmost faith that your baby will be brought to life as you imagined. She changed gears quickly. How's your new book coming? Campbell sighed again, louder this time. What little posture remained in her body flattened as she sunk deeper into the cushions of her oversized sofa. Great. She tried to fake the enthusiasm she desperately wanted to feel, wondering if her agent could hear right through it. Fake it till you make it, kid. A change of scenery could be helpful. I have no doubt that you'll be so inspired seeing your book come to life that you'll be word vomiting all over the pages again in no time. Campbell blanched at the phrasing, but more than anything, she wanted Betty to be right. She was in a rut, and it had gone on far too long for anyone's liking. Campbell had been trapped in a writer's room for the past 3 weeks, and she was about to pull her hair out. That might not be a bad thing, given how unmanageable the humidity was in New Orleans. It was different than Atlanta, like she was swimming through the air every time she stepped outside. And it wasn't even summer. The script had been rewritten so many times she barely recognized it anymore. The only positive was she now had nerves of steel, or that stuff inside Wolverine that allowed him to be strong. She shook her head back and forth. This wasn't the time to be thinking about comic book characters. But she'd listened to her book be dissected so many times, she didn't know if she wanted to see the movie when it was released. "Let's break for lunch." Craig Rosen, the director, stood up from his chair and walked out of the room before anyone could answer. He didn't have the easiest temperament, but damned if he didn't have a clear vision for the film. Unfortunately, it didn't align with Campbell's. His exploration of the plot was a bit too obvious for her taste, but she wasn't confident enough to enter in a pissing contest with him given her lack of expertise at making films. She silently made notes, hoping he was as talented as everyone said. The larger crew wouldn't arrive for a few more weeks, so every day, from sunup until sundown, she was stuck in a white, sterile writer's room, closer to an insane asylum than the chance of a lifetime. For her lunch break, she was usually left to wander around New Orleans, alone and without purpose. She stared down at her phone as she considered her options and wasted a few minutes. No messages, no calls. Typical. People only want something from you when you have something, and she was high and dry these days. "You want to grab lunch?" Riley, the screenwriter, stared across the table at her with an unreadable expression. Her eyes were wide and unblinking, partially obscured behind a pair of sensible yet trendy glasses. Was this a trap? They hadn't exactly been friendly these last few weeks, what with Riley tearing her book apart at the seams to write the script. But she was alone and bored, and maybe them becoming friends, or at least acquaintances, would allow communication to flow more easily as they worked out the script. "Sure. Do you have a place in mind?" Riley pushed her glasses up on the bridge of her nose and smiled at Campbell's acceptance of her offer. "There's a cafe a few blocks away." Her movements were uncoordinated as she packed up her belongings. She'd been sitting at a table with these people every day for weeks, but hadn't talked to any of them like a human. Did she even remember what that was like? She tried not to think too much into it as she threw her bag over her shoulder and followed Riley out of the building. They walked in silence for the first few minutes until Riley finally spoke. "How are you feeling about the rewrites?" "That obvious, huh?" Campbell continued to face forward as they walked down the sidewalk, worried her eyes would betray her discomfort. Riley laughed. "Honestly, you're doing better than most." Campbell quirked a brow as her lips twitched reflexively. "I find that hard to believe." "I swear," Riley said as she put her hand over her heart. "You haven't stormed out of the room once. And you're still here 3 weeks later. That puts you in the top 10th percentile as far as my experience goes." Campbell perked up slightly. This was news to her. She'd felt like a train wreck since she'd stepped into the writer's room, wondering why they hadn't asked her to leave yet. "So, this isn't as bad as it feels?" Being honest, for a change, was refreshing enough that she managed a small laugh. "This part is always ugly. Everyone has a vision, and they're rarely the same. Tensions run high because we're on a deadline. It's the nature of the beast. This part is supposed to be messy, though. It means people have passion and care about what we're trying to make." Campbell stopped and surveyed Riley for the first time. She'd been sitting across from her for weeks now, but she hadn't really looked at her. Always focused on the other woman's hands, furiously scribbling out lines of text or highlighting passages. Riley smiled infectiously. "I loved the book, by the way. I don't think I've told you that yet. I really want the script to do it justice." "I appreciate that." Campbell was quiet for a moment as Riley stopped in front of the cafe and opened the heavy glass door. They were greeted with a welcoming blast of icy air conditioning as they entered, the mugginess of New Orleans threatening to suffocate anyone outside for longer than 10 minutes. After the waiter seated them, Campbell ran over the menu options as her stomach began to growl with anticipation. "So where are you in town from?" Campbell asked. She hated small talk, but she needed to get better at it. She'd likely meet more people in the next few months than she'd met in the last 5 years. With the exception of talking to Betty or her younger sister Val, it was possible for her to go an entire day without speaking, unless it was to swear as she stared at an empty document on her computer screen. The cursor was like a metronome that mocked her lack of progress. It blinked and blinked and blinked like it kept track of the seconds wasted until it almost seemed to be moving faster, and Campbell could feel her career slipping by. "Los Angeles, but filming in Louisiana has become more common, so I've been out here a few times. What about you?" Riley's words catapulted Campbell back to the present, and she worked to calm her erratic heartbeat and stop thinking about the blank pages always waiting for her. "Atlanta," she answered as she let out a slow exhale. "Nice. Are you going home at all? Is it far from here?" Campbell ran her hands against her messy bun as her fingers hit a pen nestled within her thick chestnut-colored hair. She pulled the pen out quickly, hoping Riley didn't notice. "I hadn't really thought about it. I need to be writing, and my agent thought a change of scenery would be good for me. We'll see," she said with a non-committal shrug. "I heard the talent gets in soon." Campbell's ears perked, although the sinking feeling she'd been keeping at bay the last few weeks returned like someone had dropped a boulder into her stomach. "Awesome," she answered with a smile that didn't quite feel right, but she insisted on holding it in place for a few uncomfortable seconds to sell it. Besides extras, the movie only had a few main characters in it. The talent probably meant the entire cast, unless Miss Thing showed up the day before filming began. Who knew what type of insane contract she had negotiated now that she was the darling of the movie world? Part of Campbell hated that she could help Sloane become even more successful, but at this point, they were really tied to one another's success. Having Sloane attached to this project was a huge win, and even if she'd put her foot down, she would have been overruled. But she couldn't resist her curiosity. "Do you know anyone already? One person in particular?" she silently added. "I've worked with Brandon Kent, the actor playing Robert on another project. He was a sweet guy, mostly stays out of the drama and flies back home to hang out with his wife and kids every weekend. It's impressive that he can play such an asshole, considering how kind he is in real life. But I guess they don't call it acting for nothing." Riley laughed at her own joke. "What about you?" She took a bite of the food that had arrived, unaware of the turmoil such a simple question sparked. "This will actually be my first time on a movie set." Campbell blushed at the admission as she sidestepped the question, but it was freeing to put her lack of experience out there. It wasn't exactly a secret, and she didn't get the sense Riley would use it against her. "Everyone has a first time," Riley stated simply in between bites of food. "Some people love it and some people hate it. I try to soak it all in and take what you can out of the experience. Who knows? If you write another bestseller, you may be back on a movie set sooner than you think." Campbell bit back a sarcastic response to Riley's sincere words. After the success of her first book 3 years ago, she'd had writer's block unlike anything she'd ever imagined. The words didn't flow like they had with her first book, and she grew more fearful every day that she was just another one-hit wonder, a fluke, an imposter. The sinking feeling amplified in her stomach even as she willed it to disappear. "We'll see about that," was all she managed to choke out before she took a bite of her salad to put a halt to the conversation. "Morning, Riley." Campbell handed the other woman a coffee as she walked in the door. Their lunch from last week had sparked a small glimmer of friendship, and it made the days spent in the dreary writing room much less somber. Riley beamed a sleepy smile at her and ran a hand through her curly hair. "Thanks. Did you get this from Jones?" Campbell threw her body into the empty chair next to Riley. "Obviously. We're doing the table read today. You ready?" Riley looked over, her eyes bright and wide like today was her favorite day of the year. Campbell stared downward at her shirt, following the vertical stripes down her body to distract herself. I think I can manage to sit here and be quiet. That's all I really need to do, right? Riley delivered a small jab with her elbow. Mostly, but this is a really exciting day. It's the first time you'll hear the words come to life and how everything flows together. The scenes won't be shot in order, so until the movie comes out, this will be the only time you hear the dialogue from start to finish. Oh. Campbell hadn't really considered that. Added to the list of things she was still oblivious about when it came to filming a movie. So, will you be staying? Her words trailed off as the room began to fill with people for the table read, her sentence chopping like a cliffhanger at the end of a chapter. Campbell! Riley snapped her fingers to get the brunette's attention. Shit, sorry. The tips of Campbell's ears grew red as she averted her stare. Did someone turn the air conditioning off? She pushed her clammy hands against her shirt and smoothed it soothingly, although it did little except transfer sweat from her palms onto her clothes. Riley glanced across the room to see what had captured Campbell's attention. She's even prettier in person, which is rare for movies. Usually they look about half as good in real life. Lucky bitch. I hear she's not super friendly, but still professional and focused. Campbell cleared her throat and turned her attention back to Riley. What are you talking about? Girl! I don't know if it's envy or lust, but your eyes zeroed in on Sloane Murphy the second she walked in the door. You didn't even finish your sentence. You still haven't finished it, actually. Campbell's cheeks grew even hotter, mentally willing someone to turn on a goddamn fan or put her out of her misery now. Riley laughed, breaking the tension. I'm kidding. It's fine, Campbell. It's totally okay to be a little starstruck. Everyone has those moments. I'm not starstruck, she said resolutely, demanding her voice to come out evenly, desperately hoping Sloane wouldn't overhear. She needed this film to be a fresh start, and she'd given herself a pep talk this morning in the mirror. They hadn't seen one another in close to a decade, and it was water under the bridge. Sloane probably didn't even remember her. There was a 50-50 chance things wouldn't even be awkward. The best thing she could do was focus her attention back on Riley and not show the effect this meeting was having on her. The room continued to fill with people, the seats taken in no particular order that she could discern. The industry was fairly small, given the nods of acknowledgement thrown around the room as everyone filtered in. The director, Craig, took his place and ran his fingers through his slightly unruly hair. Everybody grab a chair. Let's kick off this table read. He looked around pointedly as every seat filled faster than a game of musical chairs. Those of you who know me know what I expect. We begin filming in just over a week, and we've got a tight schedule. Read your call sheet every day, and don't ask stupid questions, especially to people who have nothing to do with what you're asking. Don't unplug anything, and don't slow down production. If you can follow those rules, I think we're going to get along fine. Campbell snuck a glance around the room. No one was especially alarmed by the list of requests, so maybe this was just standard operating procedure. Her plan was, as Riley had suggested, to take what she could out of this experience, and, according to her own self-imposed rule, stay out of the way as much as possible. Sloane hadn't noticed her yet, but she had a clear view of the woman from her seat. Campbell studied her cautiously as she followed along with Craig's words. She looked good, damn good if Campbell was willing to admit it. Her hair was jet black right now, most likely already dyed for the role, her face angular and serious. It was a face that cameras kill for, framed elegantly in every shot. Sloane's eyes focused intensely on the script in front of her, but Campbell remembered them clearly, icy blue and deep, although a bit sadder than her memory of Sloane from college. Sloane glanced up then, and her eyes met Campbell's for the first time. Sloane's brow arched almost imperceptibly before her face reverted back to a neutral state. Stupid actors. Campbell's heart picked up at the eye contact, and her pulse thrummed in her neck so hard that she worried it was visible across the table. She looked over to Craig, hoping Sloane assumed she was scanning the room. Yeah, right. Sloane probably knew every second that someone was staring at her, conditioned for the last decade to be the focus of everyone in the room. Or maybe that caused her to almost forget about it, like actors forgetting about the cameras when filming a reality television show. Hey, idiot, she thought to herself. Why don't you stop thinking about Sloane and pay some goddamn attention to what Craig is saying and actually learn something? Learning. She could do learning. She had always been a good student, but beyond writing, hadn't applied herself to much these last few years. This was an opportunity to be paid to learn something new, and she wanted to take advantage of it. Campbell. She looked up like a deer caught in the headlights, her stomach churning. I'm sorry, what? Craig was beyond annoyed. She'd already broken a rule. That had to qualify as a stupid question. He sighed, loudly. I asked everyone to introduce themselves and their part in this production. Think you can handle that? Heat snaked across her chest. The embarrassment ricocheted through her body as she noticed for the first time that everyone stared at her. I'm Campbell. Her voice wavered as she spoke, her breathing coming in shallow puffs and throwing off her speaking cadence. I wrote the book the movie is based on, and I guess I'm here as a consultant. She thought she heard a few people snicker quietly, her uneasiness amplified with being the center of attention and already having made an idiot of herself. Riley spoke up next to her before Craig could get the jab in that was inevitably coming. I'm Riley. I'm the screenwriter. Campbell mouthed a silent thank you as the introductions continued to move around the room. She stared down at her hands and bounced her foot against the carpet, working to still her nervous energy as the cast continued to introduce themselves. When Sloane's voice echoed through the room, her eyes flicked upward. I'm Sloane, and I'll be playing Kara. Campbell hadn't heard it in years, except maybe on an occasional television interview. It sounded different in real life, more like the voice she remembered. It had less of an on-stage effect, more genuine in its delivery. It was low and clear, her timbre even, like she'd done this a million times before. She probably had, and Campbell willed herself to remember that this was just another day at the office for Sloane. Fantastic, Craig stated dryly. Now that we have that out of the way, we've got a long morning ahead of us. Campbell did her best to stay focused during the read, still mortified. She wanted nothing more than to crawl under the table, but figured it wouldn't be appreciated. Her discomfort made the hours pass slowly, but she gained interest with each passing page. Hearing her book come to life pulled her in, and although a lot of the dialogue was new, Riley had captured the feeling and tempo of the story perfectly in her script. Campbell couldn't imagine what it would look like after filming and post-production, when the lighting and sounds were all added and enhanced the finished product. As the read-through continued, Campbell chanced a glance across the room. She watched as the actors slowly took on the characters they played, morphing in front of her eyes. Her focus shifted back and forth between the actors. Strange that she'd written these characters into existence as she watched how quickly they adapted to the nuances of the script. And, frustratingly enough, she was most impressed with Sloane. The woman had clearly read the script already. Campbell surprised at her focus and determination with each practiced word from Sloane's lips. It was difficult for her to shake the impression she had of her in college, but a lot of time had passed. Her own personal feelings aside, she didn't assume someone got to Sloane's level without at least a bit of talent and effort. I don't think this part makes a lot of sense. Sloane's voice was firm as she looked up from her script, and the rest of the cast in the room did the same. Getting lost in a script was a lot like getting lost in a good book, and Campbell found it difficult to pull herself back to reality. Can you explain the character's motivation? I don't understand why she'd say this, so it's hard to make it feel genuine, she said, looking directly at Campbell. She hadn't been expected to be called on to answer the question. Sloane's eyes pierced into her, like they could see straight through her. She squirmed uncomfortably under her gaze, but tried to center herself and give everyone their money's worth. It was the least she could do after this morning. This scene's all about regret and responsibility. Kara, rightfully so, thinks it's her fault that her sister's gone missing, and she's lashing out instead of dealing with her feelings. That's not very mature. Sloane looked back down at the script as she said the words, like she was solving a puzzle. Who said anything about maturity? Campbell said as she found her voice. I'd argue that a lot of people make irrational choices in the moment when external forces are placed upon them. Life would be much less interesting if people made the right choices all the time. That earned good-natured laughs from most of the room. Touché, Sloane answered with a smile that didn't quite meet her eyes before she picked back up with her lines. They completed 2 read-throughs, Campbell surprised at her own exhaustion by the time they'd finished. She'd done minimal work compared to everyone else in the room. Riley had made a few edits based on how the words were delivered out loud. Craig spoke at warp speed, dissecting the nuance of every phrase, working to get the actors into the right headspace. And the actors themselves had been speaking for hours, Sloane more than anyone with the majority of dialogue. When Craig called an end to the day, Campbell wondered if it would be rude to ask someone to roll her back to the hotel in her chair, but Riley had other ideas. Dinner and drinks? We don't need to be on set tomorrow. They're blocking scenes. Riley's enthusiasm was infectious enough to help Campbell forget her exhaustion and agree to a night out. Sure, she replied, ducking beneath the table to grab her bag. When she stood up, she almost bumped into Sloane, who had moved quietly around the room and now stood uncomfortably close to Campbell. Hi, I'm Sloane. We haven't officially met. She stuck out her hand for Riley to shake. So much for Riley's gossip that Sloane wasn't very friendly. Hi, Sloane. It's nice to meet you. They shook hands, Campbell looking on as the scene played out. I love what you've done with the script, Sloane said, a small smile gracing her lips as she bestowed the compliment. Riley blushed, but she recovered quickly. We're thrilled you're on board, and I know you'll be a kick-ass Kara. Riley turned her attention. Have you met Campbell yet? Good old Riley, always trying to make sure everyone felt welcome. Campbell had never considered it a bad thing until this moment. Sloane's eyes connected with hers again. A familiar and uncomfortable pang hit Campbell squarely in the gut. So, Sloane was attractive, whatever. Lots of people were attractive, especially in the film industry. She wasn't going to lose her shit over some pretty actor from her past. We knew one another a long time ago. Sloane's words were for Riley, but her eyes remained laser-focused on Campbell. Shut up! Riley squealed as she gave Campbell a gentle poke in the ribs. You didn't tell me you guys knew each other. Also, that's a very cryptic response. Like, were you in Girl Scouts, hiked the Himalayas, ran a small counterfeiting ring? She laughed heartily, seemingly oblivious to the tension. Wow, that escalated quickly. No wonder you became a screenwriter. That took on a life of its own in about 5 seconds flat. Sloane bounced slightly from her heel to the ball of her foot and finally averted her stare without explaining their past. We were in college together, Campbell finally clarified. Same dorm freshman year, but different majors. She pasted on her biggest fake smile and turned to Sloane. Nice to see you again, Sloane. You too, Cam. I go by Campbell now. The harshness in her tone made her throat constrict. Working with someone and being friends with someone were 2 totally different things, and she wasn't going to mistake one for the other. Boundaries. It's all about boundaries. That's what her therapist said anyway. Sloane's brow furrowed. Oh, I'm sorry. Good to see you again, Campbell. If she was being sarcastic, she hit it well. Well, I'm sure you have a big day tomorrow. Riley and I were on our way out. Have a good night.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?